Hi, welcome to another session of Phototechnic Educators. Today what I'd like to do is discuss with you some of the nomenclature or terminology that's used in photography that's going to be the groundwork for your photographic images and for your experience and journey in life and photography all the way on through. So it's real important for you to get a good firm understanding of what these different terms mean, because they're all going to link together. I've got 4 terms listed up here right now, and all of these work together. They're independent things, but they all intertwine like this so much that it's very important. If a lot of you have a little point and shoot camera or something like that with a dial on the top, a little bit different than our professional model, because the professional model camera does not have this on top. It's all internal. But if you take a look at this camera, and you're going to note some things such as auto, program, TV, AV, S, and M on there. Those all mean something, and that's what these terms are going to refer to as some of these letters on your camera, and we're going to tell you what they mean. In the next session, then, we'll tell you how to work that and how they interrelate together. Let's take a look at one term here, and you'll see there's ISO. What does ISO mean? Well, somebody came up with the idea that it's International Standards, I think, Organization. I'm not sure what the O stands for. But what that means is what the sensor on your camera is willing to accept, or what amount of light that it can tolerate. And let me explain that just a little bit further. You'll find ISOs anywhere from probably 100 to 200 to 400. You may have some in between, and then it goes on up, and you maybe even have like a 1500 ISO or 3200 ISO. So what that means is, if you have your camera set at ISO 100, it means that you're out in a bright light setting. In other words, full sun, it's real bright. And you don't want that camera to register all this light that's out there available coming in, because it wouldn't show an image up for you. So what you want to do is make sure that you set the ISO at the right setting. Now, if you have your camera on program or auto, it's going to automatically do that for you. However, we're trying to teach you to take a little more command and control of your photography, and this is how we can do this. Many of you that were back in the film days, when you remember the little rolls of film we used to put in our cameras, would buy ISO 100 or ISO 50 even in the slide film days. And then a lot of you bought, then they came out with a 200 that was kind of the middle of the road. It was real good. But then 400 we'd buy if we knew that we were going to be in a party situation where the light wasn't very bright and it was a dimmer, lower light situation, and we'd have to use that. The advantage now of having digital photography is we can switch those from one frame to another. I mean, if we're in a situation where it's bright light, we can leave it at ISO 100, and then all of a sudden we walk into a darker room and we can say, oh, wow, it's dark enough. Let me turn my ISO, and you turn it down to 400, and it'll expose the photograph at the right exposure. So, as we get to bigger numbers here, 400, 1500, 3200 ISO, that means it will handle a lot darker situations. Say, for instance, you went to your cousin's wedding, and it's during the service, and the light usually isn't real bright during a wedding. This is provided it's not at nighttime now. At candlelight, it may be a little bit different. But you set it up higher, and you'll still be able to capture a good image of the bride and groom at the altar. Now, if we do have it set at these, there's just one thing to remember, that it can get kind of, we used to use the term grainy in the film days, and now we call it pixelated. And what that means is you're just going to see more of a chatter or a noise, and noise just means it's a whole bunch of dots in here that the camera's seeing, and you're going to get more of that. So it won't be quite as clear, possibly, at these higher ranges, but you will get an image. If you go to enlarge it, it's probably not going to give you the best image in the whole world. So just remember, the lower the number, let's do this, the lower the number, the brighter it can be outside. In other words, like sunlight. Okay? And the higher the number is going to be darker, or moonlight. So just kind of keep that in mind, and it seems a little bit opposite, but if you can remember that, that's very important. Now let's move on to one of these other terms, and let's take shutter speed and talk about what shutter speed is. Shutter speed, the shutter on a camera is the part of the camera that opens and closes like this. It opens and closes and very fast, in less than a blink of an eye. So what that does is allows light to come into the sensor. If we were going to draw this, and I'm just doing this so you get a little bit better idea. Let's say we have a little thin piece of silicone material that's the sensor. And this is in the back of the camera. We're just going to make kind of a rough drawing here of a camera, a side view of a camera. And this is going to be the lens, okay? Now, what happens is we've got sunshine coming in here, or light. And we've got that coming in from all directions. And that light travels through something right here. And right here is called the shutter. Now, depending upon how fast that opens and closes is how much light will come through and hit this sensor. So if you can kind of get that concept, it's just how fast that thing closes. And if you look on the front of your camera, sometimes you can see something that looks it'll look like this. And that's called the shutter. It'll be kind of in a rounded thing, and those leaves just slide past each other and open and close. And we'll talk about what the hole is here in just a minute. So shutter speed, when it's set, is how fast this thing that's right here called the shutter can open and close when you click the camera. So does it go like this, or does it go like that? And it all depends on what you get for an image with what you have that set at. Now let's go to what aperture is. An aperture is something a little bit different. That's this word right here. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger for you so you can see a little bit better. Remember I said that hole, we're going to talk about that. So let's pretend that this is our shutter. And let's pretend that this is the size of hole in our shutter. What does that look like to you folks? If I did this, doesn't that kind of look like your eyeball? Kind of one and the same thing, isn't it? Do you suppose the person that devised the camera to begin with looked at her eye and how that operated and said, bet we can make this same thing in a camera? I would imagine that's where it's come from. So just imagine the shutter and the aperture as being an eyeball. If we have the big opening here, like your pupil in your eye, the big opening, that is the aperture. So this right here, this whole opening is called the aperture. Now, the aperture can be set either wide open like this, like when you go to a dark room and look in the mirror and look at your eye and it'll be big and round. Or look at somebody else's eye in a dark room and the pupil will be real big. That's a big wide open aperture. If it goes down small, like this, it's a small aperture. Now, think about it. When we're outside in the bright sunlight, what does that pupil in our eye, that opening or aperture, what does that do in the bright sunlight? Doesn't it get down real tiny, real small? Why? Because we need to shut out the light because our eyes and brain can't handle all that light coming in. Well, neither can the camera sensor. So if you think of this as the eyeball, in the bright light it's going to shut down. And when it's dark inside, to get the same amount of light coming in, we have to open it up, don't we? So we open it up and make it bigger and bigger. Now in the next lesson, we're going to talk how all this interacts with each other and what the difference is. But I want you to understand what the terminology of this stuff is. So I think pretty much we've covered what aperture, what shutter speed is, and ISO. Now you see down here depth of field. You're going, what's that mean? Well, depth of field, let's erase this and see if we can draw something for you for depth of field. And what depth of field is, let's see if I can draw a scene here. Okay, we have mountains back here. Sorry for the not too good of artwork real quickly, but we have mountains and we have a little lake coming in front and some trees. You didn't know you were going to get an art lesson here today, but we have trees, and maybe back here we have a little cabin. And we want to get everything in the picture. Okay, so if we're going to get, and we know the mountains are way behind this little cabin that's sitting here. So we open it up and we want to get everything from here in focus back to here. Now it's a little difficult when I'm drawing on a two-dimensional plane here to make it three-dimensional. But imagine that there is, from this point back to these mountaintop point is several miles. How do we get that all in focus to be from here to here? Well, that's what we call depth of field. It's the depth from the front to the back, and that's depth of field. So imagine, now, if we wanted to have a little person standing here fishing maybe, and he's got a fishing pole, and he's hoping to have a fish on it, and we want to take a picture of the guy but have this in the background, we may not be able to get him in focus and all of this in focus, but it'll be back there and you'll be somewhat able to see it. So again, this is depth of field. This would be a shorter depth of field because we want just him, and the rest of this we don't care what happens in the focus. So depth of field refers to the distance from you, the camera, or from your subject that you're photographing, clear back however far you want to go. That's called depth of field. In the next lesson, what we're going to do is talk about how all of these interrelate. So please go online and check that part out.